Hi folks, gather around because if you thought the left couldn't get more unserious, buckle up. We're living in a time where delusion is a new virtue, narcissism is rebranded as empowerment, and taking a glorified theme park ride in a Bezos brand tin can somehow makes you the next Neil Armstrong. In today's episode of We're Totally Not the Main Character, Gail King gives us a master class in progressive insecurity, turning an 11-minute floating Uber trip into a feminist milestone. And apparently, if you mock it, you hate women, because nothing screams patriarchy like calling a space ride a space ride. So let's dive into the highlight reel of political cosplay, where self-congratulation passes for substance and every criticism is just more proof of oppression. Let's check it out.
And I'm so proud of us. I really am proud of me, because I never in a gazillion years thought I could do this. And I just saw a video of us walking up the, I don't want to call it plank, but...
Look, there's nothing wrong with confronting your fears. That's actually admirable. If Gail King had simply said, hey, I was scared, but I did it anyway, cool, we'd all be clapping right now. But that's not what this is. This is Hollywood's favorite genre, the me, starring me, directed by me. So applaud me and tell me how great I am. It's clear to anyone with a pair of eyes that this wasn't a space mission, it was a glorified press junket, a billionaire brand amusement ride so Jeff Bezos can sell his sky coaster to other celebrities chasing legacy. And Gail's out here comparing herself to Alan Shepard, who trained for years, flew a real capsule into actual orbit, and became a national hero, not because he walked up the plank, but because he risked everything to expand human knowledge. And while Gail's doing all this, we have actual astronauts today who are spending months at the International Space Station, isolated from their families, running science experiments, doing real work. Some were even stranded and had to be rescued by Elon Musk. Remember when that happened a couple of weeks ago? When NASA's own return vehicle wasn't safe enough to bring them home? That's what sacrifice looks like. That's what actual courage looks like. But sure, let's hand Gail a medal for surviving 11 minutes on Bezos brand turbulence and not spilling her water bottle. I mean, they literally had Katy Perry on the same trip. This wasn't a mission. It was a glorified TikTok collab in orbit. So yeah, face your fears, Gail. Just don't pretend your sponsored roller coaster ride is a leap for womankind. It just cheapens the whole thing.
What do you think when people say, oh, it's frivolous? Number one, they call it a ride, which I find very irritating, because they never say men went for a ride. What do you say to people who think that this was frivolous or just a ride? You know, I think the message that it sends is very, very powerful. And the people that say that, by the way, weren't there.
Ah, here we go again. Gail says, it's sexist to call it a ride. Gail, no. It's called a ride because that's what it is. You were a passenger on a pre-programmed automated capsule that did a quick arc into the upper atmosphere before dropping you back down like a cosmic Six Flags attraction. Now, to be absolutely clear, this has nothing to do with gender. Women have been a part of space history for decades at this point. Sally Ride flew in 1983. Eileen Collins piloted and commanded the space shuttle. Jessica Meir and Christina Koch did the first all-female spacewalk years ago. And again, I have to bring it back to this, but just last year, Laurel O'Hara, a female astronaut, was among the astronauts stranded in orbit for months and had to be rescued by Elon Musk's SpaceX. That is actual courage. That is sacrifice. That's history. Gail, on the other hand, just took a billionaire's toy up for a publicity stunt and somehow turned it into a TED Talk on oppression. These are retarded talking points, manufactured outrage to shield ego with identity politics. Gail is not a hero. She's not a pioneer. She's just a glorified amusement park rider wrapped in PR glitter. And the fact that she's even trying to spin this into some feminist space race is not just insulting, it's absolutely delusional.
This is what bothers me, because I've certainly read some of the things online, coming from people that I know, that I like, that I consider friends. And this is what I would say to that. Space is not an either or, it's a both and. And because you do something in space doesn't mean you're taking anything away from Earth. And what you're doing in space is trying to make things better here on Earth. What Blue Origin wants to do is take the waste here and figure out a way to put it in space to make our planet cleaner. I mean, Jeff Bezos has so many ideas, and the people that are working there are really devoted and dedicated to making our planet a better place. That's number one. Number two, have you been? Have you been? If you've been and you still feel that way after you come back, please let's have a conversation. Number three, please don't call it a ride. That is not a friggin' ride. Whenever a man goes up, you have never said to an astronaut, boy, what a ride. You know, we duplicated the same trajectory that Alan Shepard did back in the day, pretty much. No one called that a ride. It was called a flight. It was called a journey, because a ride implies that it's something frivolous or something that's lighthearted.
Well, it is.
There was nothing frivolous about what we did, and the machine that we were on, and what it took for the people to get that machine up and running, to get us up and get us back down safely. So, I'm very disappointed and very saddened by it. And I also say this, what it's doing to inspire other women and young girls, please don't ignore that. I've had so many women and young girls reach out to me, and men too, by the way, men too, that say, wow, I never thought I could do that, but I see you doing it at this stage of my life. Who would have thunk it? Not me.
Oh boy, buckle in, because Gail King just launched herself straight into the orbit of delusion, and we're about to bring her back down with a little thing called reality. Now let's start with a central premise, that calling her Blue Origin trip a ride is somehow sexist, that it diminishes the experience, and that we never say that about men, except we do. Constantly. In fact, Jeff Bezos' own trip to suborbital space was routinely described as a ride, including by major media outlets, while mocking him for it. When William Shatner, a man, took the same Blue Origin joyride, it was also called a ride. When Richard Branson did it with Virgin Galactic, also a man, it was also called a ride. So no, Gail, it's not sexism, it's just factual accuracy. You weren't an astronaut, you were a passenger. You didn't pilot the craft, wear a pressurized suit, complete any training, or face any risk beyond the same statistical odds as a commercial airline flight. There was no manual override, no spacewalk, no orbital insertion. You boarded a rocket bus, floated for 4 minutes, and came back down in less time than it takes to get through LAX security. And then we get the Alan Shepard comparison. Oh, geez. Gail says her flight duplicated his trajectory pretty much. That's like saying hopping in an Uber down Sunset Boulevard is pretty much the same as driving the Daytona 500. Shepard's flight was in 1961. During the Cold War, on a capsule where he had manual control, zero computer assistance, and a very real chance of exploding into a national tragedy. He was a Navy test pilot, had logged thousands of flight hours, and trained for years under NASA protocols. He wasn't just along for the ride, he was the ride. Then Gail pivots to Blue Origin's mission to take the waste here and put it into space. First of all, that's not a current initiative as far as most people know. They floated vague ideas about offloading industrial operations decades into the future, but let's not pretend this flight was some heroic act of environmentalism. Bezos isn't cleaning up the planet. He's selling zero-gravity vanity projects to celebrities while dressing it up as futurism. And let's not skip over the rhetorical sleight of hand Gail uses. She says, "Have you been? If you haven't been, don't judge it." Classic appeal to exclusivity. It's the same logic as a cult saying you can't critique them unless you join first. No, Gail, we don't need to spend $250,000 on Bezos' sky limo to recognize a PR stunt when we see one. Experience doesn't equal authority, and lack of experience doesn't invalidate objective observation. Then comes the emotional manipulation. She says, "I've had so many women and young girls reach out to me, inspired." That's great. Inspiration is fine, but inspiration isn't immunity from critique. Just because someone somewhere felt motivated doesn't make your experience historically significant. Children are inspired by Disney movies too. Doesn't mean Elsa belongs in the Smithsonian. And lastly, the most cynical part of this whole tirade, weaponizing feminism to silence criticism. If you question the value of this glorified elevator ride, you're now anti-woman. That's not empowerment. It's emotional blackmail wrapped in a branding opportunity. It dilutes the meaning of real progress, of women like Peggy Whitson, the first female commander of the International Space Station, who spent over 665 days in space, or Christina Koch, who holds the record for the longest continuous space flight by a woman at 328 days. These are women who lived the grind, who earned the suit, who risked everything. You, Gail, took a corporate-sponsored joyride with Katy Perry and Lauren Sanchez. You didn't advance science. You advanced a photo op. And that's okay. Just own it. But don't gaslight the public into thinking you walked on the moon because you floated in Bezos' toy capsule. Nobody's mocking Gail because she's a woman. She's getting mocked because she's cosplaying as an astronaut without the stripes. And look, we've all seen enough bad Hollywood scripts to know when someone's faking the lead role. And speaking of fakes, New York Attorney General Leticia James is having a meltdown after getting exposed for alleged mortgage fraud.
My mission is clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University that overturned legal segregation in this country. I've been taught in those classrooms where Thurgood Marshall once taught. I'm not afraid of no president. Donald Trump, we're ready for you. We're coming for you. We're standing up for you. We're fighting on. We're not going down silent. Victory, my friends, is clear. It's now. And I'm not waiting 4 years. I'm waiting 2 until a speaker by the name of Hakeem Jeffries comes to bring us some rest. Come on, ladies. It's up to us. We saved this democracy before. We'll save it now. Let's go.
That wasn't a speech. That was a live action audition for Scandal, the community theater edition. What we just witnessed was Leticia James, the New York Attorney General, delivering what might be the most melodramatic string of buzzwords this side of the Women's March slogan wall. And all because she got referred to the DOJ for alleged mortgage fraud. Now let's start with the basics. She says, my mission is clear. Great. That mission, however, apparently doesn't involve actually upholding the law objectively. It involves staging political theater for personal gain. You see, this is the same woman who ran for office promising to go after Donald Trump and who is now wanting us to believe that she was simply executing legal duty. That's like a bank robber promising to rob the vault and then acting shocked when you accuse them of theft. She continues saying, I'm not afraid of no president. First of all, thanks for the double negative there, Leticia. Very reassuring to know our top legal minds are still beefing with grammar. Second, this isn't about fear. No one asked if you were afraid. That's just you trying to frame your partisan crusade as some kind of moral war. You're not Rosa Parks. You're not even Kamala Harris on a press tour. You're a bureaucrat on a vendetta who just got slapped with your own legal scrutiny, and now you're spiraling on stage like a Shakespearean villain with a persecution complex. Then there's the appeal to historical institutions. She says, I went to Howard. Thurgood Marshall taught there. Okay, and? Plenty of people go to great schools. That doesn't make them honest or even competent. Elizabeth Holmes went to Stanford. Sam Bankman-Fried went to MIT. The idea that your alma mater absolves you of potential corruption is not just irrelevant, it's a non sequitur. That's a rhetorical dodge. You're throwing out names like Thurgood Marshall to wrap yourself in borrowed credibility, as if justice is passed down like family heirlooms. And let's talk about this gem. She says, we're coming for you, Donald Trump. There it is. The part where law enforcement drops all pretense of impartiality and just blurts out the real agenda. This isn't a legal process. It's a grudge match. She doesn't want justice. She wants headlines, airtime, and MSDNC book deals. This is prosecution as performance art. Also, when she says victory is now, what is she campaigning for exactly? What is she litigating? Because that sure sounds more like a rallying cry than a legal argument. She says, we saved this democracy before. We'll save it now. Excuse me, ma'am, you're the Attorney General, not a Marvel character. And last time I checked, using state resources to launch political attacks while dodging your own investigation isn't saving democracy. It's strangling it with a rainbow scarf and pretending it's activism. And let's not forget the reason why Leticia James is acting like this. She's under fire for her own alleged misdeeds. Mortgage fraud. You know, the kind of thing that actually affects working people, families, and financial systems. But instead of addressing the allegation, she goes full Broadway with a monologue about Hakeem Jeffries, Howard University, and a female-led revolution. These are classic red herrings, diversion tactics. When the heat gets real, wrap yourself in identity, history, and emotion, and hope nobody notices you didn't actually deny the accusation. Here's a brutal reality about what's taking place here. None of this is confidence. This was just pure panic, masked as empowerment language. When she says, I'm ready, it's not because she's poised, it's because she's cornered. And she knows it. So much so that the Daily Caller just pulled up to the home Leticia James claimed as her principal residence. And guess what? She doesn't actually live there, not even a little bit. The property she listed to get better loan terms on was about as occupied as her moral high ground. Now let's break down the allegations against Leticia, because the hypocrisy here isn't just thick, it's criminal, literally. The very same Leticia James who dragged Donald Trump through court over allegedly inflating property values to secure better terms on loans is now under federal criminal referral for, wait for it, inflating property details and misrepresenting her own residence to secure better terms on government-backed loans. You can't make this up. Well, James was out here claiming Trump's paperwork was fraud because it said triplex instead of double mint duplex, or whatever nonsense they conjured up in court. She was allegedly doing the exact same thing, but with actual legal implications. And here's the kicker. Primary residence mortgages get you better rates. They're considered lower risk by lenders. So James, who by law is required to live in New York due to her role as state attorney general, claimed a home in Virginia as her primary residence just to get a sweeter deal. That's mortgage fraud 101. Oh, and that Brooklyn property she owns, she reportedly listed it as 4 units to stay under the federal loan limit, but documents suggest it has 5, which would bump it into multifamily housing, meaning higher rates and stricter requirements. And to top it all off, there's a mortgage from the 1980s where she and her father allegedly signed as husband and wife. What did they think? No one was going to read the fine print? And Leticia's response, not a denial, not an explanation, just the usual tired, deflective nonsense. She says, they're weaponizing the federal government against the rule of law. Oh, please. That's rich coming from the woman who turned her entire office into a political hit squad aimed at one man, that being Donald Trump. She's been on camera shouting, we're coming for you, Donald Trump, like she's on a Netflix docudrama or something. And now that the feds are sniffing around her paperwork, suddenly she's the victim. She's not intimidated by bullies, except she won't answer basic questions. She just speed walks into her car with a phone glued to her ear like a panicked intern who forgot the coffee order. The irony here is just beyond poetic. It's prosecutable. She built her public brand on the phrase, no one is above the law, but if the allegations hold up, Leticia James wasn't just above the law, she was dodging it while weaponizing it against her political enemies. You see, if Trump was hit with a $454 million judgment for falsifying business records, Leticia better buckle up, because by her own standard, she just brought herself a front row seat to the same circus she ran against Trump. And this time, she's the one under the big top. And our next stop in the Democrat train of delusion is Taylor Lorenz, who for the last few months has been just swooning over Luigi Mangione. Anyway, she recently made a stop on Hannity to discuss some of the comments she made about Mangione on CNN. And let's just say that things didn't go too well for Taylor.
Simple question. Do you condemn that? Can you take a moral stand and condemn that?
What I condemn is the violence of our system, and I would love for you to acknowledge that.
I'm not asking you to condemn the system. Taylor, do you condemn people that call for assassination?
Gosh, you're going to ask if I condemn Hamas next. This is crazy. I would love for you to acknowledge what I'm actually saying, Sean, and we seem to be talking past each other. I want to talk about the fact that half of all adults for delayed because of cost. We need to talk about that 70% of Americans, by the way, believe that the insurance company practices are responsible in part for Thompson's death. These are signs of an unhealthy...
You want to put a rationalization. I am saying anybody that wants to assassinate any innocent person is wrong. I don't care if it's a Democrat or a Republican or a father or a husband, and I speak that is a simple truth that anyone with a heart would easily say on national TV that you're having a hard time with.
If you want to prevent further deaths and you don't want gun violence in the street, which I think we both are aligned in wanting, right? We want peace. We do not want violence in this country, no matter what side of the political aisle it's coming from. You need to understand motives and you need to understand the ideology that people have. And that is what my job is.
Why don't you first start with the basics? I'm going to help you out. Why don't you first condemn those that want to be involved in assassination and stop talking about them being handsome and smart and intelligent and
I didn't say that I believe that. I am describing his supporters who do believe that. And I think it's very important, just the way that I would try to understand the ideology
Will you
of,
condemn
for instance,
his supporters?
the people that march
last question.
at the Unite the Right rally. I would try to understand the ideology of anyone that would advocate for violence in this country, no matter what it is.
Do you condemn his supporters?
Once again, I believe in free speech. I believe in free speech. If they have not committed any crimes, the supporters are outside just saying things. They're not committing any sort of acts of violence.
You won't condemn his supporters. You won't say what they're doing is repulsive.
Once again, Sean, I believe in free speech and the right to free expression. I seem to be in the minority.
There's a difference between assassination and speech. Do you condemn those that support violence and, in this case, praise Luigi Mangione?
You asked, again, the people that are showing up outside to support Luigi, they're exercising their right to free speech. They're talking about the fact that over 320,000 people died from lack of health insurance in the first 2 years of the pandemic
Appreciate
alone.
you being with us.
These are things that we need to acknowledge if we ever want to fix our system. We have a violent healthcare system, Sean, and it needs reform, and that's what we should be focusing on. That's the violence we should center.
And people that have a platform like yours should speak out loudly and clearly and unambiguously, and you won't do it. Appreciate you being on. When we come back.
Boom. All right, let's unpack this slow-motion moral train wreck masquerading as an interview, because what Taylor Lorenz just demonstrated on national television wasn't journalism. It was ideological theater dressed up in emotionally manipulative language and deflection so thick you'd think she moonlights as a smokescreen. Now, let's start with the basics. Sean Hannity asks a simple, universally understood moral question. He says, will you condemn the murder of a father and husband? Not a trap, not some gotcha moment, just a basic test of humanity. And Lorenz couldn't do it. Not because she didn't understand the question, but because she understood exactly what was at stake. Her narrative. So instead of answering with a straight yes, which most functioning adults with a soul would, she launches into a deflection spiral. She says, what I condemn is the violence of our system. Classic misdirection. This is called the moral equivalency fallacy, pretending the premeditated murder of an individual is somehow just another data point in a spreadsheet of systemic issues. It's like responding to a stabbing with a TED Talk about food deserts. Lorenz continues with, I'd love for you to condemn the system. No, Taylor. This isn't a moment for vague systemic critique. This is about a man named Luigi Mangione who assassinated a healthcare executive in cold blood who you've been swooning over. And rather than denounce that violence, she frames it as a kind of protest, a logical extension of just unjust systems. This is rhetorical hostage taking. She uses real grievances like the cost of American healthcare as a shield for refusing to morally disavow someone who committed murder. It's not just dishonest, it's incredibly manipulative. She tries to shift the conversation from Luigi Mangione's actions to your failure to be mad at capitalism, as if that's an equal moral proposition. And then comes a tactic we've all seen before. She plays the victim. She says, you're going to ask if I condemn Hamas next. Right, because pointing out your inability to condemn a killer is definitely the same as demanding you recite foreign policy positions. Classic straw man fallacy, mischaracterizing the question to make yourself look unfairly targeted, when in reality, you're just showing yourself for who you actually are. But the worst part, she soft pedals the murderer's image by suggesting that his supporters view him as handsome, smart, and intelligent. Why even mention that? Why humanize a killer in that way while refusing to morally condemn him? This is an old rhetorical trick. Dress up violent actors as complicated figures to blur the lines between activism and atrocity. Let's be clear, Luigi Mangione murdered a man, a father, a husband. This wasn't civil disobedience. It was not a righteous act of rage. It was assassination. And when someone in the media refuses to say that clearly, what you're left with is an ideology that justifies violence when it serves their political agenda. Now, Taylor goes on to say that we need to understand motives. Yes, we do, but understanding motive is not the same as endorsing it. Journalism is about investigating facts, not laundering moral clarity through empathy filters to make evil look complicated. And when pressed to condemn the supporters who openly praise a murderer, Lorenz retreats behind the First Amendment like it's a moral escape hatch. She says, I believe in free speech. Great, so do we. But this isn't about whether people can speak or not. It's about whether what they're saying is repugnant and dangerous. But you won't hear Lorenz say any of that because she's benefiting, she's profiting, to her own admission on CNN, from the attention she's receiving from these lunatics. Now, instead of coming to terms with the cruelty of Mangione's actions, Taylor instead blames the healthcare system. Look, yes, America's healthcare system is broken. It needs improvement, but blaming murder on insurance companies is like blaming your landlord when you rob a bank. You don't get to outsource your conscience to the system. That's not nuance, that's cowardice wrapped in ideology. So here's the real story. Taylor Lorenz refused repeatedly to condemn the murder of an innocent man and instead tried to reframe the discussion around oppression, the systems, and societal flaws. That's not moral complexity. That's moral rot. Because at the end of the day, when you can't say a murder is wrong without adding a giant asterisk to protect your worldview, you're not practicing journalism, you're running cover for extremism. And people notice. So ask yourself, when the people who claim to speak truth to power start defending violence, distorting morality, and dodging the simplest ethical questions, what kind of truth are they really serving? How much of what we're told is principled outrage is just performance, an excuse to elevate certain narratives while erasing others? At what point does journalism become propaganda in a prettier font? If the line between activism and extremism is constantly redrawn to suit the cause, maybe the problem isn't just the system, but the storytellers. So be skeptical, ask hard questions, and most importantly, don't let moral clarity be the first casualty of political convenience. You tell me what you think in the comments down below. Have a terrific day. Peace.